Welcome to another Hollywood Times Live. Tonight, Renee Santos gets an exclusive interview with the apology writer-director Alison Star Locke.
Called The American Nightmare, where they talked about American movies, horror movies from the 60s and 70s, and the sort of like messages they were sort of sneaking in, or like just sort of reflections of the real life horrors of the time. And obviously every time has its own real life horrors, as we do now. So I really like the safe space that horror gives you to go there, you know, to get a little crazy and kind of unpack things. So yeah.
I love that. I love that you say like feminist, like horror.
Very.
You know, it's sort of like that. It's true, because I think we are expected as women to have like an inclination towards something that's more nurturing and not, you know, stereotypically violent or
I
so, you know,
like to think of my films as both. They are about women who are often usually nurturing, usually mothers, and yet also it gets real violent and hard, because that's sort of, to me, what life is, and especially motherhood. It's like it's the best of times and the worst of times. It is the most challenging thing I've ever experienced, and yet it's also the most glorious. So there you go. You
that's a
know,
really interesting parallel. I don't think I've ever heard a person articulate that for to parenting, but I imagine, I mean, just being a nanny and being able to
yeah.
return children sometimes has been full enough. So, um, wow,
Yeah,
that's
and
really
it's
cool.
not, and obviously, of course, it's like it's not my daughter herself. She's a glorious, magical creature. It's just the world is not set up really to support mothers, and so that's made it very challenging, especially if your kid has any extra differing needs. It's not set up for that, so it's a kind of constant battle. So that's sort of a part of what inspired the apology, and also another script that I'm working on now. So yeah, it's kind of an obsession
I
using
love
that
that.
personal stuff.
I, it never occurred to me that parenting could, I mean, even though it is a parenting story, but that to be like the impetus to write the story. But that, I think that leads really into our first question. What compelled you to tell this story? Since I'd
Well,
love to hear.
yeah, so originally the film came from a dream, which is a pretty crazy thing. I had this nightmare about there was a man at my front door in the middle of the night knocking on the front door, and I went to the front door, and he said, "I know what happened to your daughter. I came here to tell you what happened to her." And I could sense in the dream that it was Christmas. And then I woke up and I was like, who are these people? I have to write about this. This is crazy. Because, of course, you know, my daughter's not missing. She's never been missing, but she is autistic in a very, you know, neurotypical, unaccommodating kind of world. And I found I kept relating to searching mothers in an emotional sense, and also in a practical sense. All of the paperwork and advocacy, and how polite and calm you have to stay when people are not being so polite with you. It just became really interesting to me. Like, who are these two people? In what ways do they sort of share a grief, and obviously in what ways are they after very different things? So yeah.
I really love that. I feel like some of the best stories come from dreams, and actually
Oh
so many people don't put pen to paper after I've had so many things occur to me in a dream where I haven't written it down, and I wonder what kind of gold could have come out of that, because I think without the filter of our you know, I mean, the filter of our conscious mind that'll start to judge the, you know, like, to
yes.
just honor what comes to our subconscious mind and write about it, I think is really brilliant. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think it's very important to my hero Shirley Jackson used to keep notebooks all over the house, because she was a housewife, and wrote scary stories. She wrote The Haunting of Hill House and all kinds of wonderful horror classics. And she would keep notebooks all over the house and just kind of write things as she was cooking dinner and taking care of the kids and checking their homework. And I nowadays you just have, you know, this guy, and you
mhm.
write it on your notes thing. But I do find it sometimes is better if I can have a little notebook. If I'm good about that, I'm usually really glad, because there is something too about sometimes the phone. I'm getting too nerdy, but sometimes the phone, like the light will kind of wake you up too much, and then you're kind of starting to forget your dream a little bit. But
Yeah, I think that's true. I think they say something about like the LED light or whatever, the actual stimuli from the phone. That's
Yeah.
bad to read a book on a Kindle, they say at night too, because it doesn't allow you to like slip into
Yeah.
REM as well as if you're actually
Yeah.
reading a book. I also like pages and a binding, and I like to close books. Like I like actual books in my hand still.
I'm
There's
an
something
addict
about
for all of it. I'm like, give it me an audio book, a Kindle, a paper, a regular book. But when it comes to writing something, when you're kind of trying to be quick and download it from your brain, I like a physical. That's usually going to serve me best. But yeah, so that's where that came from, is this crazy specific thing. So I have to say, I was really, one of my favorite moments on set was when we were actually shooting that moment, because it was like, wow, they always say whatever you're dreaming up for your film, it's like, oh, this is from your dreams. And I was like, this is literally from my dreams. It's
That
really
is really
wild.
amazing to see, like, because I have to remind myself sometimes when I'm like, where does this stuff come from? And it's like nothing is trucked in from other planets. Like every single thing on the planet, somebody had to think of it at some
Hmm.
point in
Yeah.
order for it to be here. So to like see it come into physical manifestation must be pretty magical.
Yeah.
Um, I love this film. I think there's
Thanks.
also the simplicity of it that was just it was perfect, because I think sometimes when I watch something, I assume that the more stimuli, the more profound the script will be. And there was such simplicity in the fact that, like, not actually a lot happens, but yet so much happens. Like, and that's what drew me into it. I'm like, it's sort of incredible how simple you kept it
Well,
and how that
thank
really
you.
helped the
I know, I
story.
appreciate that. Well, I think part of my goal was almost to kind of be a little rebellious in a different direction. As much as I love so many movies that use this sort of modern super cut, lots of energy, lots of things, lots of locations, I thought, what if we really slowed it down and almost kind of went theatrical, like play like in a certain way, but then get more and more cinematic as you go? Because I just think so much of what I wanted to say with the film is like, no matter what awful things happen in your life, it's important to listen, and
Mm,
it's important for both sides of a tragedy to listen to each other. And even though it's very easy, and there could, I could have very easily, and I certainly entertained the idea of, why don't we go in and beat him up and cut his dick off and put it on the front porch or whatever. But those are movies that exist, and I love those too. But I wanted to do
yeah.
something different here, a different sort of revenge tale. Like, what would my version of such a thing be? And the thing that I kept hearing from families of victims was that they just wanted the other people the people who did it to understand, like to tell them things and to understand what they did, to sort of come clean in a way. But yeah, that
Yeah.
it's
I think
you want to how do you want to rebuild your faith in the complexity of humanity, right? Like, if you have something awful happen to you, you want to have faith that there's a way through that isn't just you forgiving, you know, something a
mm.
little bit more complex than that. I don't know how to put that exactly, but that was the sort of things that we were chasing with the film. It's like, what
I
is,
love that too, because I think there's a level of, in these kind of stories, where you just silence the predator immediately. And there was something about hearing his story. It almost spoke to what is right about our criminal justice system, and being able to have a calculated response and that burden of proof, and being able to hear both sides of the story and what that does to both parties, and giving people an opportunity to be seen even in their guilt. I
yeah.
think that's what's really beautiful, is that you give that the antagonist the opportunity to be seen in his guilt. I really loved that.
No, thank you.
Um,
That reminds me, though, I think it's interesting that some people I've noticed have said online that they thought the film was very pro police and very pro sort of justice system and stuff. And I was like, that's not what I meant it to be. I really felt like the police at the end are supposed to be the cleanup crew. Like, the job's done. She and her friend took care of it. you know?
yeah, I saw it as that. I
That's a
definitely
little,
saw it
I'm
more as
getting
that.
way too spoilery. I just realized. I was like, what am I
Oh,
doing?
heels of the Me Too movement. Is your hope that this film will continue to cultivate a conversation around the prevalent abuse, or does the revenge story assuage the need to continue this dialogue?
I thought this was a really interesting question. I think for me, it's definitely a furthering of dialogue. Like I think this is a conversation that unfortunately will never be over. But I think we can just keep trying to push the very important perspective that all of these women and girls that are being lost are full human beings, and they are being treated as disposable because of the potential loss of, uh, some man or boy's future, when they're the ones who made the choice to be destructive individuals. And so I
Mm,
think we need to keep putting the perspective on back on that. But on the other hand, I think that accountability does not need to be mutually exclusive from compassion. So I think we do need to like try to understand why these men do what they do so that we can help men be healthier people as well. I think it's a very complex issue, and I think the way through is both compassion and accountability. It's because I think so often folks will kind of err on one side or the other, out of either rage or perhaps just sort of protecting their own in one direction or another. But I think you got to do both. It's too much. There's too much. There's too many reasons that these things happen, and there's too much pain and loss. We have to be respectful of both.
mm. I think that's a really interesting perspective.
So yeah,
Definitely.
I think we have to keep talking and talking and talking about these issues. I definitely think the revenge story is like I I love them so much because I think they are sort of sources of catharsis. It's like ways to process our feelings, and usually in a much rawer sense. Usually you get this sort of death wish, like, fine, I'm going to go out and kill as many of the baddies as I can. And while I like a lot of those too, it's like it's a little limiting. It's I wanted to move past that sort of just id kind of
Hmm.
reaction.
I think another thing I really loved about your film was that you allude almost to her healing without the revenge, which I loved. Like she was already coming to terms. She didn't know who was going to knock on the door. So like uh, initially that process over the last 20 years of like finally moving on to the next thing. I thought that was sort of beautiful for the revenge story to come in after she had begun her process of healing, as opposed to like needing the certainty of that first before she could begin to heal, which I think sometimes revenge stories do.
Yeah.
But I really I liked that both of those elements were there because it made the revenge less calculated. It was like, you know what I mean? It was a bonus almost to be able to get the revenge because she'd begun her healing already.
Well, yeah, because and also it was important to me that her beginning down that road was messy. It's like she's hosting Christmas again after all these years, but then she's also about to drink again. And
Mm,
so it's like, what is going on? But it's like it's trying towards something, and that's feeling very scary but necessary. And so then it's like this happens, and she's like, how do I contend with that? What do I want? He asks her because he wants to kind of know where he stands. but but that's something she's figuring out as well.
yeah, that's I have to say, as a sort of brand new baby writer as I am, like it's such a daunting task to formulate these stories and then put it in a package that makes sense and resonates for an audience. So that leads me to our third question. I know that this is your first time as a director. What was it like to embark on that lofty responsibility for a feature film? And for also having to piggyback that with being its writer as well. Sounds
Yes,
crazy.
well, I will say this is my first feature. I've made tons of short films, worked on other films throughout the years, and I went to film school at USC. And so I understood the principles of it. But I think not until you are really doing something at this scale, especially this is a fairly ambitious, it's a small movie in that it's like only a few characters, it's one setting, but it's very ambitious in terms of its intensity and stunts and what creating a storm in Los Angeles and so forth. But it was also just realizing that in my brain, I thought the writer part of it would kind of just be melding into the director brain as you're going. And it's like, oh no, literally, these are two jobs you're doing at once. I did not understand that. So
Hmm.
now I do. And so that part was a little bit daunting, like trying to figure out where to balance, where to put the energy of one or the other. Like, is this a day that I have to be like, no, I really need to like kind of rework this scene? Or is this moment more about not, maybe not a whole day, you don't have that kind of time, but is this moment more about, let all that go and just go with what is feeling right, you know kind of go a little more instinctual. So I like to joke that it was the best of times and the worst of times, because it was like, it was such a dream come true, and I was surrounded by so many inspiring, incredibly talented people and experts and a full crew and this incredible cast. And yet it was also like terribly emotional, such intense material, the learning curve of making your first feature. And then on top of that, I had this piece of it that I wasn't expecting, which is like I had gone from being a stay-at-home mom for a long time, being there for my daughter,
Mm.
to now I'm making a film and everybody's like, what do you want? And I would just be like, "What do you
Wow.
mean?" Like, I wasn't used to it.
What? You're asking?
"You wanna know
Wow.
what I need to pull off what matters to me?" That's weird. And that makes it sound like I don't have the support system in my life. I do, but it's just when your attention is put in, when so much of your efforts and everything are sort of put to another person, and then it's about what you wanna express, it's really moving. So, I cried a lot. Like, openly. Luckily, I always have when I've directed things. I've just always said this, that's just part of my sort of compass. Am I getting moved by something? Then okay, we're onto something and we can keep going. If I'm feeling kind of not that moved, then all right, we need to do another take or we have to rework the scene, that kind of thing.
And do you feel like people on set really adjusted to that and were supportive of that process
I
for you?
I got the impression every once in a while people were like, "Whoa," but I think they very quickly, I think when folks meet me, it is not confusing it's very quickly obvious that I am an expressive person and that I'm a big softie and that sort of thing. So I don't think they were like, "What's happening? She's losing her mind." Instead, I think they were like, "Wow, okay." She's really in this, because I also
Mhm.
kind of told everybody at the start, I was like, just so you know, like, I'm going to try to not do this as much because I don't want to freak everybody out, but I do tend to get very, you know, in it. And sometimes that means that I cry. But I also said, I think we should all feel free to do that, because I do think that that's one of the benefits. We had a all female producing team. I'm obviously woman. We had a lot of other women who were, on the film. And I do think that there's something important to, if we get to lead, that we lead the way that feels good to us,
Hmm.
and part of that is feeling free to cry. It's not the end of the
Yeah.
world to cry. Honestly, I feel like, if folks did stuff like that on sets more, it would probably help. As opposed to, because, men are so often enabled to scream at
Yeah.
people on a set
That,
because they're feeling intense. Much rather somebody cry.
but I love that you mentioned that because I oftentimes in my experience working with women, there's like a willingness to be seen that women have in all of their layered dimensional emotions, that even though we're cognizant that men have those same feelings, like that need to sort of cover that up in order to establish their power, I think can
Which
be
is a
off-putting.
tragedy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a tragedy. They shouldn't have to do that, and then everyone else suffers for the same time because of it. There's no need. Yeah, just be honest about it. If you're having a hard moment or an overwhelmed moment in a lovely way too. I had to teach my daughter when she was young, like the idea, like sometimes tears are happy tears or just move tears.
Hmm.
Like apparently I can't read her Charlotte's Web without crying, and so I just had to explain to her, like, well, the reason why is because I think it's just so beautiful and it reminds me of my friends, and so yeah. So I think it's healthy. I think, obviously you have to be cognizant. You don't want to be like adding to, I certainly didn't want to add to my actor's emotional state in that way either. So I was trying to be, um supportive with it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So what is now that this is being released on Blu-ray, which is exciting. I saw your Instagram post today and I was like, just looking at a pile of them, like that is exciting. It must be such a cool feeling to like see a tangible, I don't know, there's something about holding on to it, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was funny
That's
because
really
I'd
cool.
seen some folks, it had been released already. I think it's been out for about a week, the Blu-ray, and but I knew I was getting some from the company, so I hadn't actually gone and, ordered my own. And so I'd been seeing people kind of send me pictures with their Blu-rays, which was really sweet. And then when I got mine, I was like, oh, yeah.
That is so
That's
neat.
amazing. Yeah, and I posted to my mom, like when she opened hers, she had like the sweetest, like I couldn't post the video, but because it was like had her address all over the envelopes and stuff, but she was just like, my baby, it's my baby's film. I mean, it's like it's very cool. Like one of the best things about making the film for sure was feeling it's like your village just comes out of the woodwork. And
Mm.
the stories are always like, and then they're asking for favors, and it's like, dude, the most people have asked me is like, hey, can you read my thing? And I'm like, I've always said I will read my friend's stuff. Like, that's not a big deal. So instead, it's like, I just felt everybody's like love and support and cheering on. And it was very moving, especially because so much of your work as a writer is like, you can't see the other side of my desk here, but it's basically like mints of every kind and papers and all kinds of colored markers. It's just like you're living in a little hermity nerd land. So then when you're, hearing from everybody in your life, it's just really very cool. Very cool.
I love that. Harmony Nerdland. Yeah, it's so true that like there's most of our work, I think, as creatives are the part that is not showcased. And
Yeah.
so to have that is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, what is your ultimate goal for this film?
Oh, yeah,
Or
that one's
is
the
there
biggest.
even an ultimate goal?
I had a bunch of goals for the film. I mean, for one thing I wanted to make something that made people think about all of those themes that we've already talked about, but also like I was very interested in the idea of how connection never goes away. These two people had a really intense and layered connection. And so even when something terrible has happened to them and between them, that hasn't gone away. And what does that look like? Again, it's like I'm always interested in making my characters as complex and surprising and to each other and themselves as possible. And I really enjoyed working with the actors on that and talking about uh, all of that detail. So I think it's like my goal for the film, and I think for all of my films, is to bring in compassion, but still be very very rough and intense with it. I like putting folks through the ringer a little bit because that's the sort of stuff that I tend to react to. Because again, it feels like horror is the most honest genre,
Mm.
or dark things like that feel the most honest to me. Not that I don't love all kinds of movies, but for me, it feels like I can let my freak flag fly and hopefully other people see this. And I've luckily heard this from folks already that they feel less alone. They feel like I had one woman who very thoughtfully was like, this sort of reminded me of this terrible trauma I had that happened. And it really kind of put an interesting light on it for me, which was extremely humbling. Um, yeah, I feel like I'm rambling, but I think it's because when you make a film, you have like 17 goals at least, right? And then,
Mm.
of course, there's also like the personal goal of like, okay, I was 44 when we made the film. I'm 45 now. And so it was like, all right, girl, are you going to do this already? Can you really run this gauntlet? And so knowing that I can and I did, now I feel much more empowered to keep telling my weirdo stories and
Mm.
just keep proving to myself. I'm not one of those people who's like, you'll see, about other people. I'm just hard on myself. So I'm like, yay, Past Alley is so proud of me because I've now made
I
this
love
film.
that. I think that that's great. Like our goal, right, is to always be the better version of ourselves. It's part of the reason I'm a triathlete because I'm always just trying to beat my best time. I'm
Yeah.
never worried about the other people in the race because
I'm not
it's,
competitive at all. I've never been that way. I want us all to win. That's why I'm always like, let me read your stuff and see your stuff. And if it's cool, I want to spread the word, because especially the more you make stuff and you're kind of in the mix of folks who are creating, the more you realize it's like the competition stuff is silly because really, like, if you're the right fit for something at the right time, you are. If you're not, you're
yeah.
not. It's the
Mhm.
way my poor actor friends, so many of my actor friends, they drive themselves so crazy, especially in the early days, trying to be the thing that people want. And it's like it's a numbers game. You're doing the work until it's like, oh, right, now we know how to fit you into something. We know that that you are perfect for this. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That makes sense to me a lot. I like one of my favorite quotes is like you can spend I may be butchering this, but it's you can spend your entire life picking apples from an apple tree and one day the universe gives you a basket of oranges. And it's like sort of been my experience. You just kind of stay in the work and creating and then
Hmm.
all of a sudden like you get an opportunity that you didn't necessarily think that you would get. And I mean even this opportunity for us to have this interview, like we couldn't have aligned this like a year ago.
Yeah,
Like who would have known? And
I
so that
know.
level of presence, and I feel like if we're too attached to certainty or how it's supposed to unfold, we limit the universe for giving us the surprises that were really intended for us. And I think like that's what's really cool about just this process with this film too. And me as an artist, like horror is not a genre I usually gravitate to, but I was so compelled by this film and then your work, and then it's inspired. Now I'm writing a solo show that's not at all has anything to do with horror, but what I loved is just like hearing your story about how you just stepped in, like you just stepped into the work, you leaned into
Yeah,
the impulse to create. And sometimes that's the larger purpose, is like inspiring other people to lean into that impulse to create. And it's not necessarily the details of the story that matter to each
100%.
individual, so
Oh,
I really
100%. I mean, I think so many of the artists that have inspired me, it's like because they just are doing it. They just keep
mhm,
doing it, and then you're trying to figure out. That's why, I want to continue to be very open about whatever opportunities or cool things I could make or be a part of and or help with or whatever. But I also have to keep driving to be like, here are my babies that I'm making. Let's find the right
mhm.
homes for them. Um, yeah. So it's
I
very
love
I
that.
feel very inspired and excited, and I'm dying to make a second because I feel like I learned so much on this one, and I can't wait to just like go in with full force. Yeah.
Well, that's perfect for our last question because I I wanted to ask you what you thought was the most rewarding part of this entire process. What has been the most difficult from like script to screen, and like does this inspire you to keep doing this,
Oh,
now that you've
absolutely.
won in the bag?
Well, I think it's one of those things where I feel like I kind of kept trying to be like, I'm fine. I don't really need to be making stuff right now. And there for my daughter. And it was driving me nuts because I think creators have to create. And
Mhm,
so getting to actually start doing it and having the support that I had and being around all these incredible creative folks, um, like the conversations I had with Linus Roche and Kim Sherman, so many of the folks, Lana Wolverton on our film, really just like fill my heart up and keep me really inspired to keep making things and hopefully with these lovely people. But yeah, so I think the best part of it for sure was definitely working with all of these incredibly smart, talented people and realizing I do have a village that I can work with. I do have a community and I have a right to be a part of it because, as we all know, every creator, whether they admit it or not,
mhm.
suffers from imposter syndrome. We all do.
Yeah.
But the thing that always carried me through was just at a certain point I was like, well, why not me? There are
I
people
like
that are
that.
more or less talented, whatever. Why not me? I have my things that I want, stories that I want to tell, and I have a right to tell them. And so I think I just would like empower everybody to push through. If it is something that they want to create and that they want to do or be a part of, fight it. Keep a fight through and keep doing it.
Do you
It's
think
important.
do you think there's a it prompted like a piggyback question here, like a level of persistent patience that you need, like sort of a
Oh,
balancing act, right?
yes,
Of
100%. I think I could get so nerdy about this, but I think it's like you have to kind of think small to think big, right? So you have to keep kind of I've got my little planner and I map it all out every day, and I don't always reach all of it, but I reach most of it. And you have to just kind of keep, I feel like I feel like myself, and obviously my colleagues as well, my collaborators as well, we willed this film into existence, and I will continue to will stories into existence. And that is both incredibly moving and soul filling and so damn hard. But it's if you're a creative person, you can't not do it. And I think that's where a lot of folks end up feeling very frustrated and struggling, because they're not doing the things that they can control. I think it's like I used to think, oh, how am I going to get into these meetings or these things? And you just realize, a lot of it is just building community and joining in on things and just creating things. And that's how this film happened. So, yeah.
I really love that. Ali, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me today. I'm super excited to put pen to paper and bring this story to life and bring it to our readers. I feel like this is an important piece of work that people should be seeing on so many levels. And I want to continue to support you. So tell us briefly where we can find you, like social media, websites, or all that good stuff.
Yes. I'm on Twitter and Instagram most actively. Alison Star Locke, ALISON STARLOCKE, because I'm one of those Alisons with one L, and then I've got an E at the end of the thing, and then it's like no, Star really is my middle name. I'm also at TikTok at the moment, but I haven't really utilized it yet. But I am on that as Alison Star Locke as well.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. If you see the film, like, write me. I want to hear your thoughts. If you've gotten the Blu-ray or you're watching it on VOD, show me. I love all the nerd photos. Like, send me photos or post photos of you with like the apology on your TV screen or whatever. I love all that stuff. Tell me what you're thinking, even if it's not like glowing. I'm a big girl. I can take it. I love discourse. I love conversing about it. I think it's really interesting to hear the questions that people have, and you learn so much as a filmmaker hearing from the audience, So thank you so much, Renee. This is really fun.
Awesome. Thank you. I feel honored to have gotten to sit down with you.
Thank you for watching, and suggest you subscribe to this channel for the next Hollywood Times Live.